Hey guys, Patterns in Paradise welcomes you, philosophical travelers, old and new. We have yet another podcast,
packed with contrast, meandering through wacky roads of mind, combining curious tangents intertwined. I'm Reggie.
And I am Monk. Enjoy!
Rocks.
Yes.
The erosion of water on rock. How time...
See, I love it how automatically your mind went straight to erosion. I didn't say it, but
Rocks,
it's what I was thinking.
right? Rocks, erosion, and then time, right? Time, the perspective of time. Because I may have mentioned this before with Stephen. We were talking about how the second we shift our perspectives of short-term versus long-term, everything suddenly changes. And we suddenly are able to understand, why should I focus on the long-term?
Yeah.
So, to anyone wondering, we've got our man Stephen Meerseth. He is an absolute superstar. Fella's currently in... Did my fucking mic fall off? I got so scared to fuck, man. Let's be saying nothing. Okay, Klutz is back at it. Yeah, fucking. At least the mic isn't... At least the mic isn't lost, bro. I thought to myself, did you fuck him, man?
Mate, I would have noticed because it would have been dragging. The wires are all connected. But no, that's brilliant. The mic was not attached.
I thought we lost it,
And
man.
it fell on the bench. Oh, that's brilliant.
Alright, this is going to be published for anyone curious as a list of PIP blunders.
Yeah. What's it called? Bloopers.
PIP
That's the word.
bloopers.
Pip bloopers.
Just to get everyone to understand that we're not gods, okay?
Far from it.
We're trying to be, but not there yet. We make mistakes.
Although we may be
errors.
gods to some people.
Oh,
Perspective is everything.
perspective.
Anyway, going back to said topic of rocks, including water. It's insane for us to think. With salt water, there's a much harsher erosion in comparison to obviously fresh water. For any common sense, basically, from my own understanding, I'm not a geologist or anyone studying nature into a deep understanding as to why, but from my own common sense and my studying when I was at school, obviously, when we were doing geography and actually understanding the erosion in the earth, let alone rocks itself, is the fact that there's salt in the water, and naturally that's very coarse. Even when you jump in the water, you can feel the difference, almost like it's a heaviness in a way of the water. If you jump into fresh water, it's not as
Dense. dare we
dense.
say?
That's the word I was looking for, dense, because it's creating that buoyancy as well within you, but it's also making you feel like you're heavier in the water. I don't know how to explain it. It's just weird as hell.
In regards to...
Yeah, carry on.
So, my dear friend, Scotty, in regards to the erosion you were mentioning earlier,
Yeah.
obviously there's the coarseness of the salt that would tend to rub away and wear away at the rocks, and subsequent smaller particles making them smaller and smaller.
Yes.
From a physical standpoint, right? Physical pressure on physical pressure.
Yeah.
But we can
Wave
also
after
consider wave after wave as it comes through, whereas we could also analyze it from a chemical standpoint to say, in the same way, an iron sword, for example, or anything made of iron chains, in fresh water versus seawater, after being dipped in there, the process of rusting will tend to occur much faster, due to, of course, the chemical processes involved with the salt taking effect upon the various metals and other ions within the compound. We could also look at it from the angle of due to the ocean again being of different temperatures, right? Sometimes it's hot,
True.
sometimes it's cold. So you maybe have the heat from the sun above heating up the rocks, and then you have the cool from the ocean below,
Yeah.
which again the expansion contraction may cause quicker erosion and
Quicker and deeper, probably.
quicker and deeper, no doubt. And today we went cliff jumping and rock climbing in Protaras here in eastern Cyprus, and
Cabo Greco.
Geographical. And it was the most profound set of rock formations of the waves over time cutting certain patterns into the rocks that were absolutely fascinating. But these patterns couldn't have come without hundreds, if not
Nature.
thousands of years of nature taking its toll on the rock face.
100% agreed there, Monk. With even how high the face of the rocks were. Right now, we can see a massive we can even see the line of where the water is now and where it has been in the last maybe month. It's probably dropped quite a bit, probably because of the fact that it's coming to summer now. The water is evaporating faster around the island. At least that's my own idea of it, reducing. But again, it could be also the tide. Obviously, we know the ocean has times where it's higher and lower. But let's say 100, maybe 200 years ago, that's when those rocks would have been eroded. And yet they are still sharp as diamonds. And we have the cuts on our hands and knees and legs to prove that. Because I did not fall hard or scrape my legs hard at all today. Or slip properly to the extent where I actually felt myself get cut. The cuts I found on myself were a while after it had actually happened. And that's just a proof to show how sharp those rocks are. And it's crazy to think that had been eroded so many years ago. And yet it's still in such great form.
Scott, Reggie, I think we need to get a geologist on this, because
Yeah,
we could very
100%.
well be chatting a bunch of
Absolute
shite.
bollocks.
Someone there is thinking, what do these idiots think? The ocean level rises and falls. Oh goodness, no. But on your point there of, in particular, tides washing in and out, various levels of sea level as they rise and fall, leaving different markings on different levels and layers of the rocks. It would seem more appropriate to estimate that the ocean levels have risen and fallen more over the course of hundreds of oh my goodness, hundreds of thousands of years and tens of thousands of years, as opposed to possibly the last 200. Then again, what will be the effect of a dramatic increase in global temperature due to, let's say, climate change or other acts of God, may we say, other natural disasters, maybe volcanoes, Yellowstone supervolcano? What happens if the temperature of the Earth rises to the point where suddenly Antarctica and the Arctic suddenly start releasing far more explosive rises in sea level due to all of the ice now melting? And it's been predicted that if all of the ice melted in Antarctica and in the Arctic, we'd be looking at a rise in sea levels of between 30 meters to about 50 meters. We're sitting on a bench now above, 20 meters above the waterline, 15 meters above the waterline. We would be swamped right
more
now.
20. But yeah, we would. That church in the distance would be covered. That's nowhere near 20 meters there. I would say that's about 18, maybe 15 meters above the sea from where that is. Because where we jumped off, that was about 10
meters at
maybe
least.
even 12 from where we jumped earlier. And that was not that much high in comparison to where the church is. So, yeah, that would be completely gone. I mean, you'd be able to jump into the water from the next cliffs up, the next level. And how many houses and buildings would be destroyed if that were to happen? in Limassol, that's a load of buildings gone.
That's Limassol to start with, let alone Larnaca, let alone Paphos.
Finicudes.
But now we start
example?
expanding this outwards, and we wonder to ourselves how many of the world's major cities and population hubs are within 20 meters of sea level. New York, for example. London, to name a second. Rio de Janeiro, to name a third. At least lower part of Rio de Janeiro, and that would be madness. Can one even fathom? Or again, over time, because these things don't necessarily happen overnight. We would hope, but at the same time, can we fathom the level of chaos and panic as people over the course of 5 to 10, 20 years start trying to relocate out of states and city centers that would have once been above ground, now suddenly below ground in a couple of years? There would be pandemonium. It
would create an incredible wave of destruction. Excuse the irony and the pun, but it would be a massive wake-up call for us to understand.
It would rock civilization to its core.
The puns are rolling
like rocks, darn it. Too good.
Oh gosh.
Okay, we're eroding our audience's patience here.
I mean, dad jokes 101.
These guys are in here for the long run. Man, it just seems like
it's ridiculous to think how powerful nature is, and yet we don't actually pay enough respect to it, in my own opinion.
We don't. We truly do not. I mean, it does seem like, in many ways, we are so skewed in our thinking towards purely a bias towards the short term.
Yeah.
In a sense, it's that much easier to focus on the events of today and tomorrow than worrying about the events of 20, 30, 40, 50 years, or worrying about how the actions we take today could affect our grandchildren. And you see, once upon a time, things were simpler. We had less to worry about. Scotty, just before we went on air now, we had been discussing the idea that in many ways things were easier emotionally back in the day for our ancestors. Again, look, they faced some pretty traumatic stuff. Tribal members being taken by wild animals, seeing starvation and malnutrition and wars with other tribes. I mean, things were tough, but life in a sense was simpler. They didn't have to emotionally connect and worry about something that happened with people 7,000 miles away. What's going on with the American elections, what's happening with China and Taiwan, what's happening with Russia and the Ukraine. And in a sense, when we are forced to think of purely the day by day and the worries and the struggles and difficulties, it puts us in what we could colloquially call a fight or flight response. It really is the case that when we only think of the short term and we do not put time and effort into visualizing the long term or attempting to come up with a set of goals and values and principles that we can use for the long term, that we are not only physically unprepared for whatever comes, but mentally and emotionally we could potentially get shattered by any event that occurs that is outside of our realm of understanding. What did we see in Syria, for example, in the last 10 years, where how many countless families were forced to flee Syria? People with decent jobs and a stable family life, and people who just wanted to create a life for themselves and their families, and
not necessarily rich life.
Not necessarily rich life, but just a life that doesn't involve getting your home bombed and digging your dead family members out from the rubble. And how suddenly people's lives can change entirely at the flick of a switch. And so unless we try and look to the long term, as tough as it may be, we are not prepared for uncertain events that may happen, because they will take us by such a storm, it will feel as though we are powerless.
To, let's say, for argument's sake, not to completely disagree with your own ideas, obviously they're Monk, but I'm not saying this in any way to sort of discredit what you've said, because I actually agree with it. But let's say for someone who's listening and they would be thinking, well, how can we prepare for so many different scenarios? Let's say natural disasters. How could we prepare for the ice caps melting in Antarctica? How could we prepare for volcanoes erupting? How could we prepare for earthquakes? Or even simple rock erosion in places like Trolos Mountains or even Cabo Greco, when you're living on rock faces, let's say, or even other countries where there's houses or buildings on rock faces.
Which face massive landslide potentials every year.
Exactly. How could they specifically be preparing? Are they going to be preparing for, let's say, countries with nukes to be bombing everyone? Or are they going to be preparing for the most relative situation that would be affecting them in that situation? So let's say someone who's living on the edge of a rock face, they will be preparing themselves. Let's say, I don't know, a getaway bag or getaway bags. Let's put a plural there because it wouldn't be just the one. Just in case, let's say, God forbid, the rocks collapse and suddenly you're finding yourself having to scramble and get your stuff and get out the house as soon as possible. You would prefer to be prepared for something like that rather than, let's say, a nuke coming in and wiping out everyone.
So let's unpack that quickly. The first point that you mentioned there, Scotty, is the question of how is it relevant for people to prepare for the longest term circumstances when there's something that could eat you tomorrow, as they say. It's all good trying to plan, if we look at tribal times, it's all good trying to plan for how much meat will you need in a month's time if your hunters cannot go out tomorrow and the day after to successfully bring back food for the tribe. Or if times are tough, you're not really going to be thinking about the long term. And it's a very valid point. True that, when we are in times of stress and struggle, our bodies and limbic systems automatically default to focusing and worrying about the short term. They devote as many resources as possible to fending off the threats of today than worrying about the threats of tomorrow. We can look at having grown up in Zimbabwe, myself and yourself. In some ways, we can see huge blessings and benefits that came from growing up in Zimbabwe. The
massive.
mentality of make a plan. Whatever happens, make a plan. If
You're
there's
ready.
you're ready. You are preparing. You're very good at reacting to these situations that are thrown at you on short notice.
Yeah.
For those that are listening, if there's no electricity, find a way of getting a generator. Find a way of getting the fuel for it. If there's no water, find a way of getting water. Either get a delivery or pump by hand, or find a way of getting supplies of water. If there's another problem, make a plan. If there's another problem, make a plan. So it's very good from a defensive mindset standpoint, i.e. planning for the short term. For the long term, however, it comes with its disadvantages.
Yeah,
where people
I agree
spend
with that.
so much time looking for the short term that it's almost like thinking about the long term and even trying to make long term plans exits people's vocabulary.
Yeah.
And you have entire nations that are only thinking of the tomorrow and have no reason or for that matter, no motivation to try and plan for the long term, let alone act for the long term. So in answer to your question, Reg, it seems like the least we can do that covers both the short term and the long term, and that also helps. And keep in mind, I'm getting quite a bit of this from Jordan Peterson. His mindset has stuck very profoundly. The idea that the least we can do is plan for the short term in a way that also benefits the middle term and the long term.
It incorporates them both.
How do you incorporate all decisions in one? And my thoughts on this is become the kind of person who is capable of being versatile and adapting to whatever circumstances life throws at you. Yes, maybe you'll have a wonderful house with a wonderful family and a wonderful life, and then, God forbid, one day a civil war starts and a bomb gets dropped through your roof and half the family gets taken out. That is not pleasant circumstances for anyone. But is that person who suffers that kind of trauma capable of coming out of that event stronger than before? Tough as that may be to stomach, unfair as it may be for those who died in that incident, is it possible for the survivors to develop over time a mindset of, no matter what happens, how do we grow from this? How do we get stronger from this? And how do we find a way of altering our perspectives, even if it means almost being outrageously optimistic, even in the darkest of days?
Yeah.
So that we can somehow pull victory out of the jaws of defeat.
And again, for argument's sake, to build upon the argument you've positioned yourself to, let's say, defend, would be then to ask, how can you be in the mindset after such loss to prepare for such events to not happen again? And honestly, from my own experience, I would not know where to start. I don't know about yourself, George, Monk, but again, that comes down to our experiences and our own perspectives of how you can actually prepare for your reality and for your situations. Okay, I think there's some big fireworks going off because I can hear some big explosions.
Yeah, that's fireworks. For a moment I thought that might be flak.
I thought it was gunshots to begin with, but oh, that's beautiful.
They're the most gorgeous
fireworks
going on.
Okay, I want to stay for a second.
We shall stay for a second and observe fireworks. We are in no present danger. They're simply fireworks going off. We are not being shelled by militia.
We are not, let's say, interrogating nor being forced under will to talk. We love you all. We'll be back in a very short while.
If you ever wanted to start a podcast but didn't know where to get started, didn't know how to get started, or were intimidated by the whole process of recording, editing, synchronizing, and creating your own podcast from scratch, let alone marketing it and then running analytics, then look no further. Anchor is the premium podcasting platform out there, directly connected to Spotify, and they will directly market and distribute your podcast for you to outlets such as Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Breaker, Radio Public, Pocket Casts, and many other different outlets for free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and create your podcast right from your phone or computer. Right from your phone or computer. With a simple, easy to use display that allows you to go from idea stage to recording to publishing in as little time as humanly possible, while teaching you the essential basic skills needed to host, run, and evaluate your own podcast. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. I repeat, anchor.fm to get started. Reggie and I would not be in such a position, so easily able to plan out the releases of our podcast step after step after step, and getting ideas from inside our brains out into the microphone and out into the public as easy as we are without the use of Anchor. These guys are a game changer and will change your podcasting experience. Anchor.fm to get started. Back to the studio.
And
Reggie
we are
Monk.
back.
Enjoy.
Back on the attack.
After those fireworks, it was a beautiful display. We might be posting some nice pictures for you, lovely viewers and subscribers. Anyway, back to question on hand. How is it that someone can truly prepare for such events?
Truly prepare for such events and be able to prepare for the long term while at the same time handling day-to-day short-term difficulties, obstacles and circumstances. In the case of the example we gave, let's take someone in Syria who is living your average life, and then let's say a mortar round comes through the roof and half the family gets taken out. In that moment there will be pain on a level above and beyond the comprehension of 99% of people. No one can comprehend the pain or even truly empathize with the pain of someone who's just seen his potentially wife and kids, or if it's a woman, her husband, her children, her parents, taken out by a mortar round, bodies flung against the wall, torn to pieces. But the question we ask ourselves, practically, what do we do? And again, this is purely a theoretical standpoint. Alright, there's people out there.
Just a quick disclaimer. This is not anything that we've personally experienced, and to anyone that has, firstly, we would like to apologize for any possible misunderstandings or misinterpretations that you may have actually experienced. Carry on.
In fact, let's go the other way. We apologize for nothing, right? Simple as that. We apologize for nothing. We're here to learn. If we are wrong, put us straight.
Please let us know.
Because the sooner we get these perspectives out there and get hammered and hassled by the public, then the better and sharper our perspectives become, and the less drizzle we end up talking. So to any who are going through the situation, you are heroes and heroines each and every day for pulling through. But if we maybe are not seeing your perspective rightly, oops, it happened. Please put us right. We'll do better next time. But no apologies on this end. That's an apology.
Fair enough.
Kidding.
No, that's a fair point. I do understand and actually agree with George Monk there, with not apologizing, but simply asking you to help us understand with a deeper meaning as to this perspective of life. Anywho, please carry on, sir.
Final continuation of the question. There's the book The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. It speaks about the profound power and control that one gains over one's own emotional systems by putting oneself in the present moment and asking oneself, do I have a problem now? Not in 5 seconds, not in 10 seconds, not in 20 seconds, but now. And even if the answer is yes, just the fact that we took our awareness into the present moment of right now stops us from having to worry, or even being able to worry about those events which may happen, or those events which could happen even in the short-term future. As well as the understanding that we can only control those things which we can control. And what if we learn to become as skilled as possible at controlling those factors, even if it means holding it together in front of your grieving children as they cry over the death of their mother from said mortar attack. Which could be the case. That
I think it's a very difficult concept to really truly actually comprehend. But again, preparedness is only going to come to yourself for your own issues, situations, however you may see them. You are only going to understand your own actions to what you can do and what you can't do. I don't see anyone else being able to give you advice. So take this as a simple suggestion from both Monk and Reggie, myself. We can advise or even suggest let's put it as a suggestion. It's not advice. Think of your situation, think of your actions, and think of how you can do better for the next day. That's what I truly believe is how we can make ourselves overcome the situations we have experienced and become even stronger individuals.
Reggie, I love how you summarized everything I said in about 1/10 the words. Thank you for that.
No problem at all. That's what I'm here for.
That's truth right there. What can we control and how can we get better? How can we become the kind of person who's better able to control those things we can control? It does sound very abstract, but then again, all we can really give is abstract, because until a very personal, private situation happens to each and every individual out there, the least you can do is deal with that very personal situation, and we can only
100%.
help so far. And if this is of any assistance out there, guys, go ahead, control those things you can control, and
don't worry about the things you can't.
110%.
And that's exactly what you were going on to say. And that's what I wanted to mention as well, is if you are not able to control something, do not stress yourself out. Do not get worried. Do not hate yourself for not making a difference. You are only an individual that can control so much. Be happy with what you can control, and be content with the fact that you are also still here. Make the best of it, and make sure you can enjoy. At the end of the day, that's all we're here to do. Enjoy our lives.
You only live once. You only live once, and you get to decide, do you live once mucking around, or do you live once trying to make a difference?
Exactly.
This has been Reggie and Monk on the first part of a 6-part series on perspective of time, life, the world around us, and our own subjective experiences.
In summary, again, of what Monk has said, perspective is everything. Take care and make life better.
Yalla.